Hey everybody, it's Carm here, back on the first Thursday of the new year. Happy New Year to you all. Hope you had a good evening of transition, whatever you may have done. It was happy, fun, and safe. Just did some watching some old favorites. It's been kind of a tradition, little ritual. If I can make it up that late to when the ball drops. Buckaroo Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai, my favorite from childhood. Hadn't seen it in a long time. It's a great fun cast of characters. Lots of what I call that guy, quote unquote that guy characters. You know you've seen them in a million things. You can never think of their name, but you know their faces. There's about half a dozen of those in this particular film, and always fun revisiting here. A little Woodstock. This in particular I would watch on New Year's evenings. But yeah, as ever, doing a lot of listening to various things, mostly CDs as of maybe the past week or so. But there has been some vinyl mixed in as ever. So yeah, let's start right in with an old favorite artist who yeah, been just revisiting a lot of this particular period. Klaus Schulze live. I guess appropriately enough, considering this came out in 1980, which I'm sure I'm not the only one who can't believe that that's actually 40 years ago now. And listening a lot, reviewing a lot of things from that period of transition from one decade to the next. That one in particular, since that's, well, the earliest transition from my own lifetime, and the one I remember the least about, the least of, since I was a little kid at the time. But of course, this was a rather transitional album for him, kind of going from his the earlier sequencer-based style into something, just kind of new territory in general, new colors, moods to an extent. And this kind of real nice illustration of kind of that transition. Well, I think it was recorded, part of the album was recorded in 76, from what I understand, and the other part in 79. The first, it's a double disc set, so the first two side-long pieces sound to be the earlier more sequencer-based, especially the tune Sense. More like Moon Dawn. That one came out in 76. And Heart and Die Magic, the later pieces, where you started hearing it's kind of shifting away from the sequencer more, at least for the time being, and going towards really replaced more by this kind of electronic percussion, which was really interesting at the time. I don't know if I'd say it was primitive sounding, but it was, before the drum machines that came in later. But it was kind of an interesting, the textures of the rhythms were very interesting and distinctive to him as he was discovering them and going through them. As ever, the sense of development and pace is so distinctive to how he's always seemed to approach things in the long form, just extending the pieces out, allowing them to breathe. I know the piece, especially the piece Heart, really starts off very quiet and just has this real, I don't know, if you want things to constantly change, it could really be a test of one's patience. I love it though. I just love it how it very slowly, dynamics are very quiet and eventually kind of gets into the piece. Increasingly percussive, more propulsive and percussive. The pace quickens, but still that mood is just sustained throughout. He's just a real master of that. I'm sure many of you know him well, know that, but understand that. But yeah, I just enjoying this album a lot lately. Been playing a lot of Dig It, which I know I showed in the past, from around the same time in 1980. Is going further into those developments, but yeah, very, very recommended if you haven't heard it already. And really love these this kind of collage in the gatefolds. Oh yeah, and Arthur Brown is pictured right here. He sings on Die Magic. When I first heard him way back when on Dune, Klaus's '79 album, he's on, yeah, Arthur Brown's on Die Magic. I wasn't quite ready for it at the time. His approach to singing and how he, I guess you could say it's almost like in equal measure they kind of accompany and lead the other, in the music. I've come to appreciate it, his vocals and his lyrics, which I guess is kind of semi-improvised and maybe even sort of his own, I don't know, meta language. But it really it fits. It's very suited, for what they're both doing, with each other. And I think they only collaborated for maybe a couple years, not very long. But yeah, interesting. Always revisiting that and getting a fresh take on it. But yeah, Klaus Schulze Alive from 1980. Okay, the next one here is well, the revisiting of this is largely influenced and inspired by Rob from Sound Strange. I think his most recent video. Oh, here we go. The director wishes us Happy New Year. His most recent video, I believe he was showing some of this artist, and he was speaking of something else, saying, "Oh, how am I going to talk about this?" My same reaction to this one here, Elliott Carter, string quartets. I don't remember if it was this specific one or these quartets that he was showing. I think he was showing some string quartet music by Elliott Carter. Also it reminded me that Elliott Carter was a lifelong New Yorker, and he got to see so much of it change throughout a very long lifetime. He was born in the early part of the previous century and lived well into this century. I think he lived into his hundreds, 102 or 103, and fascinating to hear this again. I'd found this not long ago, actually, at Record Wonderland. Yes, probably $2. It definitely couldn't go wrong. But yeah, very very difficult to speak of what he's doing here. Kind of coming from outside of classical, and modern classical has never been maybe my own focal point or point of focus, but you've always kind of appreciated it from afar, so to speak. But from a musical standpoint, what I could gather of the technical aspects, incredible tonal variety, the dynamics of the string players, every possible sound it seems you can get out of the violin family, violin, viola, cello, seems to be on display here, and the pacing and the way in which they interact and interweave, based on the compositions, is really very striking. As far as the imagery it evokes, it could almost be like, as trite as it might sound, kind of animated music from the perspective of another planet, maybe, of an alien's perspective on animation and putting their own take on it. What really keeps coming to mind, though, is you imagine passing by a round table of several people, maybe rather professorial types, speaking very deeply and spiritedly on very complex philosophical matters, and you have, even though if they're speaking the same language, you're not quite sure how to, it seems incomprehensible to the rest of us, but the conviction and the enthusiasm which they're speaking about these issues draws you in further, and you still want to listen for those little kernels that you might understand and be able to kind of latch onto and sort of take you with you in a sense. That's kind of how, it's kind of an illustration. The music seems to illustrate that sort of situation. And yeah, just kind of, it beckons you, even as you're a little bemused, it kind of beckons you further, and you just, you want to keep listening. Really neat cover. Could also be like another picture of the music. But overall, very enjoyable. Something I would really recommend if you want something different. If you like string quartet music and you'd say you're more familiar with something like Beethoven or just more quote unquote conventional, definitely give this a try for something. Definitely another perspective. Yeah, it's definitely worth a listen. So Elliott Carter. Yeah, string quartets 1 and 2 by the Composers Quartet and none such, and also a piece called Variations. Yeah, pretty neat stuff. And finally here, something I found not too long ago. Azumi Nakamura, Mermaid Boulevard. Guitar player who I'd heard of previously, but hadn't really looked into him very much. He plays electric and acoustic guitar and guitar synthesizer, and you can see joined by a really fine lineup at the time. Recorded in '77, came out in '81 on Inner City. But yeah, you got Lee Ritenour also on guitar, Patrice Rushen on electric and acoustic piano, Anthony Jackson bass, Steve Foreman percussion, Ernie Watts on saxes, also Harvey Mason on drums. A really nice, I guess we talk about transitional albums or periods. Kind of when, at the point when fusion was starting to get, what's known as fusion, starting to get a little bit lighter and more pop oriented, maybe moving towards something that people were looking to hear on the radio, more maybe traditional song forms. You could almost imagine a lyric going to. I'd say this is one of the better ones that I've heard of that period, as far as kind of retaining that. I guess some of the more adventurous qualities of fusion, but also having that balance with the song forms. And it's very catchy, this album, but also has a lot of kind of subtle orchestrations, especially in the way the synthesizers played by Jun Fakamachi. Plays a lot of nice string synthesizer, kind of an almost glassy, transparent tone to it. A really nice kind of an underlying bed for everything else to ride on. And his playing is very, I find, very crisp, and it's a pretty traditional jazz guitar sound, but you could tell he could really play around with a lot of different styles and approaches. And I like every song on here. There's one circled here called Q. One of the few that weren't composed by Kazumi. Has a really nice kind of jaunting, lilting feel, especially the way a lot of the phrases are kind of bent and kind of strung around. Really, very, very catchy. Waltz for Street or Suite. It's a nice acoustic piece between him and Lee. I'd say my favorite is probably Poppy's Walk on the second side. It almost reminds me, at times, a little bit of the Rippingtons, who actually didn't come along until almost 10 years later. It kind of anticipates that. But just a really nice, kind of sunny, breezy feel to the album. Again, without being too sweet or too watered down. It just has a really nice balance. Again, kind of the stuff that's a little harder edged and more adventurous, with something that's very accessible and just very easy to get into. It's something, if you're not into instrumental in general, you could get into this. If you come from a more pop-oriented sensibility, could definitely get into it. So yeah, very, very enjoyable. And this cover is really quite striking. Have a pyramid there. But yeah, Kazumi Watanabe, Mermaid Boulevard. Yeah, definitely recommend if you're into any of these players and into this approach. And I'd say it's even one of the better things I've heard, more preferable things I've heard on this label, which is a really nice label if you're not familiar. Inner City. But yeah, definitely check it out. And yeah, just wanted to share a few of those. I don't think I've done one of these in a while. These job I've been wanting to get back to, doing the Thursday videos, since it could have been quite a while. Here's the background music. I don't know how well it's coming through. Yet again, another Starstream's favorite. Michael Shreve and David Beal, The Big Picture. I heard it way back when. It's on Fortuna Records. My good pal Gary and I were talking about recently. One of many wonderful labels of the time throughout the 80s and a little bit into the 90s that don't seem to be around anymore. Lots of nice electronics and percussion on here. But yeah, very enjoyable. A little different if you're not as familiar with Michael Shreve. And again, there's that connection with him and Klaus Schulze, he played with in the early 80s. Yeah, another one very much recommended. Well, yeah, want to come on and yeah, first one of the new year. Hope it's a wonderful new year as much as possible for everyone. Yeah, I don't know. I'm always optimistic. I don't know. I've always had that thing about me, even whether there's reason to or not. I don't know, just something inherent. So looking forward to seeing what comes next. And yeah, we can all just do our part and make it what we can make it. So and hope we're all well. And thank you for watching, and any new subscribers, and the dozing director and I. Well, to the next one. Peace, love, and joy.